Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to those of you who have been waiting patiently, and welcome to those who have just joined us. We'll get started with the presentation. My name is Ali Thompson. I work here at the CAA in the engagement team, and I'm supporting the consultation process for the pricing review. The purpose of the session today is to give you an opportunity to learn about the proposed changes. We know that not everyone leaps at the opportunity to read the complex documentation we've published around this consultation. So hopefully this session helps you understand those documents a bit better and the proposals, and that assists you in making a formal submission. We do encourage you to read the published documents before you make a formal submission. Throughout the session today, you can submit questions and feedback through the Q&A function. You should be able to see that in the top ribbon of your screen or in the browser. I will moderate these questions just to avoid any repetition. And while we'll do our best to answer your questions today, the nature of a lot of the questions we receive can be quite complex, and we may need to confirm details with our various subject matter experts within the organisation. So in that case, we'll capture your questions and publish the answers on our website in the next few days. We may also lodge questions as requests for information under the Official Information Act, but we would still aim to get this information published as soon as possible. You can also use the Q&A tool to share your feedback about the proposals, but this won't be published visibly to the rest of the audience. This is just to allow you to be as candid as you like, and so that you can also make your comments privately. We can appreciate that you might be interested in the views of others and what they think about the proposals, but it isn't appropriate for us to facilitate that kind of public discussion due to the strict limitations of our role in this consultation process. All of the comments received through the question and answer function will be recorded, but they won't be considered as formal submissions. So this is to prevent any duplication between what we receive in these sessions and what we receive through the formal submission tool. Rest assured, though, what you tell us today, it won't be dismissed. It will be compiled and taken into account in the consultation analysis process, and that's to make sure that the total themes are consistent and to identify any discrepancy between formal submissions and other insights that we receive along the way. So now I will hand over to Mark, who is a co-lead of the pricing review and the pricing review project. Thanks, Mark. Over to you.
Kia ora, Ali, and good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of the pricing review is to get the authority back on track to be in a financially sustainable position from 1 July 2025. The authority's last funding review was stopped in 2020 due to COVID and was not restarted by the previous government. The authority's same functions cost significantly more since fees and charges and levies were last set back in 2017 in respect of AVSEC, and 2017 in respect of CAA, and 2019 in respect of AVSEC. This is over half a decade ago. There's been no increases to our fees and levies since that time. So essentially this means our fees, charges and levies need to be increased to enable us to bring in enough revenue to cover our operational costs. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, the authority has been reliant on government support to cover our operating costs. This financial support ends at 30 June 2025. The COVID pandemic has had a significant impact on the aviation sector. While the aviation sector recovers, there needs to be While the aviation sector recovers, the need for effective regulations is critical to keep Aviation New Zealand safe and secure. It is critical we receive your submissions and comments. Your opinions will not be dismissed. They are very valuable to this process. However, it's important to remember consultation like this pricing review is not about reaching a consensus. It's about ensuring decision makers have appropriate information from participants, stakeholders, and interesting parties to help inform decision making. The authority, the board, the Minister of Transport values your opinions and feedback on this pricing review. They will all be taken into account in the final advice provided to the Minister and Minister of Transport, who will be seeking decisions from Cabinet, who are the ultimate decision making about the outcome of this pricing review. The pricing review presents 3 options to cover the same level of revenue, which I'll go into more detail further in this presentation. The authority is not proposing to change the current cost recovery model. We're also not seeking to add any new additional funding mechanisms or change the pricing levels that were proposed in the suspended 2020 funding review consultation. For example, areas such as unmanned aircraft, the emerging technology sector, or the current basis of the agricultural levy. They will form part of a full funding review, which will commence in 2025 and will be consulted on before they come into effect from 1 July 2027. Option 1 is the authority's preferred option. This is because it spreads the increased costs across the system more fairly. It reduces negative economic, financial, and system performance impacts compared to the other 2 options. That means those parties who've received the highest benefit from the safety and security systems, and therefore generate the most risk, pay the higher proportion. I've already explained broadly why the authority is doing this pricing review. However, I want to talk in more detail about the funding pressures the authority is facing and what is driving the authority's costs, and what will happen if we do not resolve the authority's funding challenges. The funding pressures listed on screen are the high-level information, but are explained a lot more in detail in both the consultation document and the cost recovery impact statement available on our website. We would strongly encourage you to take the time to read those documents in full, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask, and where appropriate and possible, we'll do our best to answer all of them as fully as we can. Essentially, the authority was already facing challenges before the COVID pandemic, and COVID brought new challenges which the authority has had to lean into. Like a lot of New Zealand organisations, we have also been affected by inflationary costs, as well as additional costs from the evolving aviation system, such as emerging technologies. On top of that, passenger travel, both domestically and internationally, are still down on pre-COVID levels. And while they are increasing, they're not returning to pre-pandemic, they're not forecast to turn to pre-pandemic levels anytime soon. I want to point out that we're 100% aware that the authority is not the only organisation continuing to face challenges post the COVID pandemic, or facing challenges in the aviation landscape as well. It's really important we receive submissions from aviation participants, operators, stakeholders, and the public generally to explain how the proposals in this pricing review will impact you, so they can be taken into account as part of the decision-making process. While the lower passenger volumes are a significant issue for the organisation, there are also a range of other factors and drivers that are not related to passengers which contribute to this. We've listed some of these here, but they're explained in much greater detail in the cost recovery impact statement on our website. There's a lot of information to absorb in these documents. We try and be as fulsome as we can to explain the rationale behind what's driving the proposed increases. So again, I encourage you to take the time, ask questions, and familiarise yourself as much as you can with information. And if there are things you are unclear or you'd like further information on, please feel free to contact the team and we'll do our best to answer those questions for you. This slide is not intended to cause alarm, but it paints the worst case scenario about the consequences if the authority does not resolve our funding challenges that I've already spoken about. As I already mentioned, our current revenue is not enough to cover our current resourcing levels. So with no increases in our revenue, we would have to make significant reductions in our frontline staff across the board before 1 July 2025. And for example, this would result in 92 staff from our frontline inspectors, the ones who do the licensing, certification and monitoring activities for our aviation participants. They would have to reduce. Equally, we'd have to reduce 580 staff for our frontline AVSEC workforce from across the country. These are the folks that you see when you travel through airports and undertake screening activities. This type of reduction would have significant impacts on timeliness of queues and other important security work that we do. Reductions in staff numbers like this will have major knock-on impacts for the aviation sector, the travelling public, as well as the safety and security of the aviation system, New Zealand's economic development, as well as the New Zealand economy as a whole. I've already shared the preferred proposal at a glance, which adjusts all fees, levies and charges for inflation and increases all three passenger levies by a percentage as well. This table shows you a bit more detail about what the total increases is comprised of for the preferred option. I know it's a lot to digest on one slide, but rest assured you can find this table in the cost recovery impact statement, as well as further information that explains these proposed changes in more detail. I also mentioned that we need to increase the funding rates to maintain existing resourcing levels, but that would only maintain the current levels of regulatory activities. The preferred proposal also includes provisions for increase in our staff so they can keep up with demands and improve wait times, both for certification and also for queue wait times at airports for the next two financial years beyond 1 July 2025. Without introducing any new funding mechanisms, there is a very limited way for the authority to increase our revenue to cover our operational costs. That said, there could be far more than 3 ways to slice and dice the revenue streams. The 3 options we've landed on for this pricing review proposal were included because they covered the same level of revenue to carry out the same functions. Here we identify potential options to address the funding pressures for the CAA. This includes both the safety and security regulatory oversight and core functions for the authority as a whole. The costs for the core support functions, for example, payroll, are reflected in CAA's costs due to the requirements in the legislation and the structure of our shared services model to support both CAA and also AVSEC. The inflation rate of 43%, which affects all our fees and charges beyond the 3 core passenger levies, take into account inflation rises from the 2018 right the way through until 2027, the last 2 years being forecasts. Since we're in a predominantly people business, over 80% of our costs are directly related to salary costs. Wages and exposure to wage inflation constitutes the greatest share of inflationary impacts. There are 5 key criteria we considered in our impact analysis. We reach these by 1, continuously improving aviation safety and security outcomes. 2, enabling successful fulfilment of statutory functions, our international obligations on behalf of New Zealand, as well as meeting the wider government expectations. 3, enabling an increase in the financial resources to create resilience against future events such as pandemics or other types of events. 4, balancing cost recovery from the largest number of beneficiaries to ensure a safe and secure aviation system. And 5, ensuring the wider financial and economic impacts from levy increases are net positive overall, negative impacts are minimised, and positive impacts are maximised. Our preferred option is option 1, by 1, increasing fees, levies and charges and adjusting for inflation. 2, increasing passenger safety levies. 3, spreading the cost fairly, so those that receive the greatest benefit and generate the most potential risk pay the highest proportion compared to smaller businesses. In option 2, there is a potential risk of safety and security for smaller operators being disproportionately financially impacted, and the impact on smaller businesses dealt with harder with real benefits to passenger safety levies. While it appears to spread the costs evenly, it is not equitable when you compare the smaller number of aviation participants with the 20 million plus passengers benefiting from the aviation system. Option 3, this mitigates the impacts on smaller businesses and participants. It recognises commercial airlines hold the highest proportion of all aviation safety, of all aviation activity. Risks and benefits are great. Risk and benefits greater as it's spread. The risk and benefits are spread across one specific part of the sector. It is less fair than option 1 described earlier. On screen, you can see the 3 cost recovery options for ABSEC. And on this screen here, you can see the graph showing more detail. Again, there's more information on our website, both within the consultation document itself and also the cost impact recovery document. As we have done for assessing the impact of options for CAA, we've done the same for ABSEC. We are reaching the desired outcome goal by 1, continue to improve aviation safety and security outcomes. 2, enabling successful fulfilment of statutory functions, our international obligations on behalf of New Zealand, as well as meeting the wider government expectations. 3, enabling an increase in financial resourcing resilience against future events, for example, another pandemic or similar type of event. 3, balancing cost recovery from the largest number of beneficiaries from the aviation safety and security system. And 5, ensuring the wider financial and economic impacts from a levy increase are net positive overall. Negative impacts are minimised and positive impacts are maximised. Like with CAA, our preferred option is option 1. This looks to increase both domestic and international passenger levies by the same or similar proportions. Options 1, 2, and 3 recover the same amount of revenue and will return the authority to a financial sustainable position from 1 July 2025. All 3 options reduce queuing times at airports. Our target is 95% of passengers, both domestic and international, will be screened within 10 minutes. However, Option 1 is the only option that spreads the cost fairly without impacting either domestic or international passengers. Option 2 disproportionately increases the costs for international passengers, while option 3 targets domestic passengers with a similar type of cost increase.
Again. So where you can learn more, it's really important that you're all aware of where you can find information. We know that we've just given you a lot of information in a short space of time through this presentation. So, and as I mentioned at the start, we aim to help you understand everything as best as possible to inform your submission. The consultation document itself includes much more contextual information that informs the proposals, including information about our aviation system, our rationale for choosing the preferred options, and the wider economic impacts for all of the proposed options. We've also published some of the supporting information, which is also noted on the screen, and we have a live Q&A page where we'll be publishing information as inquiries come throughout the consultation period, and that's where the Q&As from today's session will be published. So all that information that you need can be found on our website to that green link, aviation.govt.nz/pricing consultation. So we've talked about making submissions several times. So how do you actually do that? The primary way is through a form on our website. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because I've skipped a slide. So there's 3 key consultation questions that we have prepared that we want our answers to in your submissions. The first one being, which option to recover costs for CAA and for AVSEC do you prefer and why? The second one is, do the preferred options for CAA and AVSEC, being option 1, raise concerns for you? And if so, why? And the third question is fairly broad. Do you have any other feedback on these proposals or information that you think the authority should be aware of? A couple of comments we've already received throughout the processes are relating to how these proposals might impact the sector, and that's actually information that we really encourage you to share in your submissions. So if there are specific impacts on your organisation or operation, please give us as much detail and information about that as you can. So now onto the slide that I thought I was at before. So there's several ways that you can make the submission, the main one being through the online form on our website. And there's also PDF and Word versions of that form, which you're welcome to download, fill in and email us, or you may also print them off and post them if you wish. Those are the best ways. If you choose, you can also just directly email us through the pricing consultation at caa.govt.nz. But if you choose to do that rather than using the forms, please just make sure it's easy for us to identify which key questions you're answering with your submission, just to make sure that we interpret it correctly. So, what happens after the consultation? This is a very formal and regulated process. The first step being, after the consultation closes, we will analyse all the submissions, all the viewpoints will be considered, and we may adapt the proposals based on what's received. We'll then engage with the Minister of Transport to consider the results of the consultation and the options we provide. And whatever those decisions are, they will then be taken to Cabinet. It's really important to reiterate here that the proposals that we've published now are just that, they're proposals, and nothing is confirmed until after the formal process has taken place, and those final decisions will be made by Cabinet. And then whatever is decided, any changes to the current pricing regime would come into effect by 1 July 2025. Also, to allow the sector to plan for changes, the authority and the Ministry of Transport plan to seek final decisions from the government by 20th of December this year, which allows then the required regulatory amendments to be in place by the 31st of May, taking effect on the 1st of July. So we'll now move on to the question and answer section. We're going to be publishing the recording of the session today, but we'll stop the recording here.